Hello and welcome to government class. In today's government class, we'll be looking at some of the demerits or the weaknesses of the Richard's Constitution. One of the criticisms of the Richard's Constitution was that the Executive Council was still dominated by the Europeans, like what we had in Clifford's Constitution. Richard's Constitution equally, we also seen the same thing in Richard's Constitution, whereby the Executive Council were dominated by the Europeans, with no Nigerian represented in the Executive Council. So this was one of the criticisms against the Richard's Constitution, the fact that it was still the Executive Council was still dominated by Europeans. Why would Nigerians not be there when policies affecting them, that would affect them, are taken? They are not there, they are not able, they don't even have a say, they don't even know when these policies are formulated, how it's formulated, or reasons that even necessitated the formulation of these policies. So that was one of the criticisms that was leveled against the Richard's Constitution. Also, despite the high number of elected representatives in the regional legislative council, limited powers were given to the members to discuss legislation but not to make law for the regions. So despite the fact that the numbers of elected representatives in the regional legislative councils was high, the members could not make law. They were only given powers to discuss legislation. So, despite the fact that the number of elected representatives in the regional legislative council was high, they were only given power to discuss legislation. They could not make laws. The power to make laws was still in the central legislative council, but members of the regional legislative council could discuss on issues that they needed to make law could discuss on the bill. They could make bills, but they could not make laws. Only the Central Legislative Council still had the power to make laws for the regions. The governor still retained his veto power to accept or reject any decision or advice of the legislative member. So, although we have a Central Legislative Council, Regional Legislative Council, Executive Council, and all the rest, the governor still retained his veto power, and this was the same thing that we could see in Clifford's Constitution. The governor had veto power. So despite the fact that there are people in the region, in the Central Legislative Council, in the Executive Council, they could only discuss. The governor had the power to accept or reject any bill or any law. He had the power to make law. He could reject, he could accept. So the governor still retained his veto power under the Richard's Constitution of 1946. So this means that the Executive Council and the Legislative Council, they were only there to give advice to the governor. They were not there to make laws. They could only give advice. They could only discuss on legislation. Another weakness of Richard's Constitution of 1946 is the Constitution divided the country into unequal parts, thereby making the northern region larger than other regions in the country. So, the Constitution divided Nigeria into unequal parts, making the northern region larger than the other parts of the country. The northern region was larger than the western and the eastern region. So, this was one of the reasons for the unequal divisions of states that we still have till date. It started from the division of the country into unequal parts or regions. Up till today, the federalism introduced by Richard's Constitution still remains a desirable factor towards the country's political system. So the federalism that Richard's Constitution made is still a desirable factor towards the country's political system. The elective principle that was introduced in the Constitution was still limited to Lagos and Calabar, like that was the same thing we had in Clifford's Constitution, and other regions were disenfranchised. So the franchise was limited to only those people that resided in Lagos and Calabar, and people that had an income of £100 and above. And with this, we've come to the end of the class. In the course of this class, we looked at some of the demerits or the weaknesses of Richard's Constitution. And with this, we've come to the end of this class, and I'll see you at the next class.